What's up, guys? We are back here once more for Form Check Friday, and we're gonna get right to it because we're trying to burn through lots of these videos. We're still only on like the 2nd of January, so I apologize if it's taking long or taking longer than you would like for us to get to your video, but I promise you, you will get either an email or featured on this show if, show? Is it a show? Is this a show?
Sure.
Yeah, this is a show. You will either be featured on here or emailed back. I promise you, if you send one in, it just might take 7, 8 months, 2 years, something like that. Anyways, enough jabbering. So our first one here comes from a guy named Kyle. Now Kyle, I noticed right as you're setting up, buddy, back is rounded. But one interesting thing of note here is that your second and third reps look a lot better. So I think it has to do with the way that you're setting up. So what I want you to do is I noticed the way you lower the weight on that. Oh, sorry, you didn't do a third rep, but I noticed how you lower the weight on the second rep with your back in a much better position. So what I want you to do is actually start setting up from the top down, as opposed to setting up at the bottom and then trying to pull your back flat. I want you to start at the top, set your back, and then try to keep your back set as you go down and reach to the bar. If you're looking for somebody who does this, there's a guy named Christoph Viersbicke. He pulls sumo, but he's a really good example of top-down setup. So I want you to make that differentiation, give that a shot, and let me know if that helps. So next up, we got a couple of videos from Seth Morrison here. He is in high school, powerlifting. He competes in equipment. So he's got a raw squat here. The first thing I notice on his raw squat is that he's definitely a very knees forward squatter. So he breaks at the knees go forward, very like John Hack style kind of squat. Not really anything looking like it's wrong with your raw squat, but I just wanted to use that as a reference point. So when you go to your equipped squat here, you're squatting in a similar fashion. Now, one of the things I've noticed about being in equipment myself is that I kind of have to alter the way that I squat. So what I want you to try to do is when you're squatting in equipment, I want you to think more about pushing back. I want you to think more about keeping your shins a little more straight up and down. And it looks like you do a pretty good job of it, to be honest. But maybe a little bit more focus there will help you make a little bit more of a difference between your raw and your equipped squat, which is one thing he mentioned in the email, that his equipped squat isn't that far ahead of his raw squat. The other thing is that it might just take time, my man. So moving on to a bench here from Seth as well. He says he has a problem with losing tightness as he presses off the chest, and I definitely see it here. So as he comes down to his chest, you can see everything's locked in, his back's nice and tight, everything's in good position, but then as soon as he goes to press, his shoulders sort of jolt up into almost like a shrug position. So one thing I want you to try to do is it's all about that moment of changing direction. So as soon as you go to change direction, I want you to make sure that you initiate by squeezing your back. So this might sound weird, but I want you to focus first on your shoulder blades and your shoulder positioning, and second on the press. So especially as you pull into the pause, pull those shoulders back, and as you press, you almost want to initiate with your upper back and really focus on keeping those shoulder blades pulled back into position. He's also got some suited deadlifts here, and he says his coaches want him to do a grip and rip with his suited deadlift. Now that's definitely not something I would advocate, not to step on the toes of his coaches. I'm sure they're experienced people and they know what they're talking about, they have the reasons for it, but I'm gonna explain my viewpoint on this. So for me, I'm not a top-down setup person. We talked about this in the previous video, but it looks like, and from the sounds of it, he's not a top-down setup person either on his raw deadlift. So honestly, what I would try to do, Seth, is I would try to more accurately recreate your raw deadlift. It looks like we're losing a little bit of back extension and stuff like that. So I would take the second or two to pull your back tighter and to pull yourself into a better position before you deadlift. It looks like you're kind of locking your lats in. Yeah, you missed one rep there on the lockout, and that's probably because we weren't able to maintain good back extension throughout the lift. There you go, and see there's one there where you kind of had to fight through it at the top. So I think if you take more time to pull yourself into a better position, get that little bit extra back positioning or back extension like you do in your raw deadlift, use that in your suit. I think that's really gonna help through your lockout there. This next one here comes from Paul Marshall. Now I know Paul trains with a couple of good buddies of mine, Garrett and Taylor Shadgett in Ontario. He wants to know if I can offer him any advice on trying to get his back a little flatter. I would probably try to maybe widen things up a little bit. It looks like your grip's fairly wide, so I would either bring your grip in a little bit or bring your stance out a little bit, which might help a bit more actually. I might leave your grip where it is, bring your stance out a little bit, try to push your knees out more. And that's gonna give you a little bit more room to get back extension. It looks like you're doing a really good job. I know you're a strong dude, and I've seen some of the numbers you've put up in competition, so I don't think this is like a make or break thing, but it might be something that we can tweak a little bit that'll help. Sometimes, if you're a bigger guy, it can be hard just because you have so much mass in the midsection and in the hips. So I think if you widen up, that might allow you to get a little bit more extension just by moving some of the soft tissue structures out of the way and out of obstruction. So try that out. Hopefully that helps, Paul. Drop me an email and let me know how that goes. Next one from Jeff Yap.
My name is Jeff.
Now Jeff is doing some squats here, and this is a really good example of something I kind of wanted to illustrate. That's why I chose Jeff's video. It's very subtle. His squats look actually quite good, but what we're seeing is sort of a slight shift when he hits the bottom, and you can almost tell that the weight's midfoot. He hits the bottom and it rolls onto his toes out of the bottom almost every rep. So walkout looks good. I'd maybe play with your grip a little bit, see if we can get those wrists a little more straight through, but honestly your back's staying in a pretty good position. It's just right as you hit the bottom, everything's kind of shifting forward. So it looks like you're kind of rushing the bottom position a little bit. I would try, and I want you to think about stopping your knees at a certain point. So just imagine your knees are coming forward, that's fine, but I want you to think about just stopping them like there's an imaginary wall in front of your knees just before you hit the hole. So try to keep that weight mid-foot and just imagine an imaginary wall in front of your knees, just to try and stop them from getting that last little bit of rocking forward as you hit the bottom. I think that's gonna help with the weight shift. This next one is from a guy named Tugay. So this video from Tugay, and hopefully I'm saying your name right there, buddy. He's doing some conventional deadlifts here. Looks like he's got a lovely wall under his belt. I'm kind of jealous of that. Good basement gym setup here. But there's a couple things that are going on with your deadlift here. You're doing a really good job of building a lot of tension in your posterior chain, but especially on that first rep, you're actually starting the bar almost, it looks like a little bit away from your shins. The other thing I would do is I would definitely try to sit your butt down more. You're pretty much doing a stiff leg deadlift. I would try to sit your butt down, get a little bit more back extension, and sort of push the floor away. Try to use your quads a little bit more off the bottom. It looks like you're strong, it looks like your movement pattern's good, but I think you're gonna be able to lift a little bit more weight if you can get from like this sort of hip angle and just bring everything down a little bit. Sit your butt down a little bit. And yeah, I mean, your RPE was low, the weight was, I think that was like 85% or something like that. So you're looking good, but I would just try to sit your butt down more, make sure you keep that bar nice and close. All right, so we got one from Matt Zakowski. This is 75%, and he notices his hips are shooting up a little bit before the pull starts. The first thing that I'm noticing with your deadlift here is as you go to pull yourself into position, everything's tracking out in front of the bar. So you're getting set in a decent back position. I would try to get a little bit more extension, but your knees and everything are getting out in front of the bar, your low back's rounding out. So I would work on, maybe try to widen your stance up a bit. You got really long legs. And also I'd probably give conventional a shot, to be totally honest, and see which one you end up stronger with. But there's a couple of things there. I'd probably need to do some hands-on coaching with you to try and fix. But the biggest one is your knees coming out in front of the bar. So as you pull yourself down, try to focus on getting back extension without letting your knees in front of the bar. So just imagine there's a wall that comes up from the bar that's gonna stop your knees from going forward, and then you have to kind of pull all your tension back behind the bar and open everything up. That should help a little bit with the hip rising off the floor. At least if you keep your knees in a position where your shins are a little more straight up and down, that's gonna at least put you in a consistent position to where you load up as to where you start your lift. All right, now we have our last one here from David Strachan, and we're doing some deadlifts here. So the biggest thing I'm noticing, David, is as you start your pull, your knees cave in. So that's something we really want to watch out for. Not that, I mean, you're gonna die from it, but definitely want you to try to narrow your stance a little bit so your feet are pretty much straight down from your hips. And I want you to really focus on making sure that you're not crowding your knees with your grip. So if you need to move your grip out a little bit, that's totally fine. and just work on keeping those knees out over your toes. If you start to pull and your knees come in, a lot of times what happens is we lose a lot of the advantage for the glutes. So the glutes won't be doing their job correctly, and they'll transfer a lot of the load into the back, which is why we're starting to see your back sort of cave as you go through some of these. So if we can keep the knees out a little bit better, I think that's gonna go a long ways. It looks like you're doing a good job of trying to brace your back, but it's just not working quite as well as it could because of the knee cave causing your glutes to, I don't want to say shut off, but causing your glutes to not function optimally because they're in a less leveraged position. So keep the knees out over the toes, make sure we're getting some external rotation from the hips. One thing that Mark Bell said that I really liked and have kind of stuck with as a cue is imagine your feet are on dinner plates and you're trying to twist them out. We don't necessarily want your feet to move out, we just want you to have that pressure outwards. So we're creating external rotation in the hips, and that should help to counteract what's going on in your deadlift there. So we realized we had a little bit extra time. We're gonna do 2 more here. So this first one comes from Thales. I'm sorry, man. So he recognizes here that he's having trouble getting to depth and that he gets a little bit leaned forward. So he wants to know if I have any mobility recommendations or anything like that. But I think the biggest thing, man, is gonna be just dial the weight back until you can take every rep to depth every time you train. That's honestly the hard truth. There's no sexy answer of like, do this stretch and then you'll squat to depth. It's bring it back down a little bit. It looks like you're not far from depth on some of these reps, so I wouldn't be like too concerned. Don't beat yourself up about it, but just take that weight down 10 or 20 kilos, make sure you're sinking them to depth, and make sure you're strengthening that full range of motion. I bet you if you get better depth, you're probably gonna solve that leaning forward part, because a lot of what's happening is as you're coming down, instead of being able to like sit and then come back up like this, if this is your torso angle, you're coming down and then stopping. So the force is essentially coming back up before your body's you know, in a fully stretched position. So you can think about like throwing your e-brake on the highway on a car. So that's the effect it's gonna have on some of the systems of your body. It's like, it's a really high intense brake as opposed to getting to a natural, more natural anyways, sort of end range of motion. So just dial things back a little bit, sit a little bit deeper. You can practice some pause squats and some tempo squats would be a good recommendation. So tempo squat meaning you just go slow on the way down, slow on the way up, to really figure out what muscles need to fire when and get comfortable with that bottom position. Those can be something that I would find, that I've found very useful in some of my lifters. And also just keep filming from the side so you can tell when you're at depth and when you're not. He wants to know if squat shoes and a belt would be beneficial. Honestly, sure, probably, but I mean, they're not gonna fix your depth issue. So fix the depth first and then maybe look at squat shoes and a belt. All right, guys, that is it for today's Form Check Friday. Again, we will get to your video. Please continue sending them. We love you all very much and are super happy that this series is going as well as it is. Dylan's gonna do some more super sick animations on the video and draw on everybody's faces. And I'll try and get him not to draw any dicks. But thanks again, guys. We will see you next time.